For today's video, I'll take 10 statements, 10 pieces of advice that are also questions that many of you ask me going into primarily a non-technical interview, and I'll try to clarify on whether these statements are true or false. And the first one is reusing stories is not allowed in a job interview. Of course, for the behavioral part here. And I believe, this is a pretty general advice in the sense that, of course, if you repeat your story over and over again, those interviewers, will take a ton of notes, and when they will confront those, they will notice, hey, this guy is talking about the same thing over and over again. Now, from real life experience is not necessarily the case. I mean, don't get me wrong, they will take notes, and it's not a good idea to spin 3 stories in 5 interview rounds. That would be, I believe it should go without saying you cannot really do this. But I do believe that having 10 excellent stories is far better than having 20 so-so stories. So, the balancing, it's, basically a balancing act between finding the best stories that you have and only using your best stories, as well as, having answers to the question you're getting asked. And to tell you from experience, it's not by far a big problem to have an answer to a behavioral question. The challenge is always having the best possible answer. So I would very much encourage you to reconsider this of not being able to use a story multiple times, especially for the phone screening round and for the on-site interview. I believe it's perfectly fine with the note and with the acknowledgement that these interviewers will take notes, and you must focus on highlighting the thing you want to highlight there, so these stories will not essentially look like the same thing. Right, so these interviews will not focus on the same precise topics at different levels. So in Amazon terms, if you want, they won't ask you about the same principle twice in a job interview. So to that extent, you can use the same story. Of course, keeping in mind we're talking about within a context of being the best possible story. You can also zoom in and zoom out of a story, so you can make it sound slightly different as well if you want a trick here. Second statement here, if I don't have an answer to a question in an interview, I will get disqualified. Now, so if we use a little bit of common sense here, if you don't have an answer to a behavioral question, those are designed so that anyone has an answer for them. So if you don't have an answer for those, that's not going to be to your favor, to say the least. So I really do believe it's a very negative thing. Now, there's also the other extreme where if you don't have an answer to a question, they will intentionally try to put you under pressure by asking you some impossible questions, or even, questions that not necessarily expecting candidates to have an answer as a prerequisite to get a job offer. So it's perfectly fine, if what's important here is you understand that if you don't have an answer to a question, you must move on from what actually happened there, and don't think, hey, it's game over for you in the job interview. Try to get back on track and try to always do your best in the job interview, because it might as well be a trick, a hack, a technique that they use, an interviewing technique. Not the best. I do agree with you, it's not the best to get you stuck with these things, but still, you must get back on track as quickly as possible. So my short answer is no, you will not get disqualified if you don't have an answer to one question, keeping in mind that you prepare for that interview to some extent. Number 3, if they don't answer to 3 to 5 days after the on-site interview, it basically means they rejected you. I don't believe that's true. I have heard numerous reports of 2, 3, 4 weeks after the interview getting back with a job offer. By the way, even if they extend your job offer, that doesn't mean that's actually a final job offer. So, but that's another thing. So, especially during these times, give them, 2, 3 weeks for an answer. Number 4, this one is specific to Amazon. So technical roles at Amazon will have up to 80% behavioral interviews for the on-site. So I took this from, I cannot really remember the source that I took, but I know it's someone who worked for Amazon and who gave this advice that their interviews at on-sites at Amazon are very behavioral, even for the technical ones. And I had some recruiter at Amazon actually demystifying this, that they try to strike the 50-50 balance in technical interviews. And my feedback recently has been that it's even less behavioral than that. So even less than 50% behavioral nowadays for purely technical roles. So no, it's not 80%. It's much less. It's considerably, it's less than half even for the technical roles. Number 5, referrals will significantly make a difference in your application process. So let's split this into two. For getting interviews or getting someone to look at your application, yes, I do believe it might play a role in those things. So for you to get an interview, yes, a referral could be useful, although not always. I would be cautiously optimistic with this one. But for interviewing, if you have a referral, that means nothing. So in my experience, I've never had any success with anyone who's got a referral, and that referral to be mentioned to me as being an important qualifier of their success. So referrals do not work when passing interviews. They do somewhat work to get interviews or to get people to look at your information at your CV to eventually call you in for an interview, but that's it. Every behavioral or every question in an interview should be answered in a star format. So yes, I believe this is true to the extent that every question, we're talking about the behavioral question. A behavioral question is one when they ask you about your past experience in order to predict your future performance on the job. Why am I saying this? Because there are misconceptions. For example, a situational question would be, what would you do if? That doesn't call for a star answer, or tell me about yourself. That doesn't necessarily need a star answer. So yes, to answer this statement, is it a good idea to always use the star method when getting asked behavioral question? Yes. For 98% of the candidates, I would say it's a very good idea, and it's definitely an advice that I would encourage to give you. For the rest of 2% is people applying for very senior roles who actually like to get out of the template and who are really extraordinary communicators for roles, that actually need it, public policy, director level roles, and so on. Quick note here, there's also the SOAR, PAR, SAR, and other variation of the STAR method. To my experience, these are nothing more than a time sink. So I didn't find them particularly useful, if you ask me. So take that for what's worth. Number 7, memorizing answer to your questions will be helpful moving on with your interview. This is another one, that's advice that I believe was valid 10, 15 years ago, when, these interviews were not that as advanced as they are today. So no, in today's market, it will not fly if you memorize these things, simply because the pool of questions that you might get asked is so vast that it's impossible for you to memorize any answer to these questions. And even further, what happens is that if you memorize 10 answers, or 15 answers, 20 answers, when I ask you something and you haven't prepared something, your reaction will be to loop through those 20 answers. And if you don't have an answer for them, you will block, you will get stuck. I know this unfortunately happened quite a few times, so that's why I'm giving you this advice. So memorizing stuff will not fly. Reading it thoroughly, for example, Amazon 14 Leadership Principles, reading it 10 times, understanding what's going on, yes, that's good advice. But memorizing stuff, no, that doesn't fly. Number 8, candidates who prepare the most get the job. No, I don't believe that's sound advice. I have not found this to be the case. It's as simple as that. Now, I won't get into specific details as to what makes a great candidate or not, but it's not the candidates who prepare the most who actually get this job. I'm not telling you not to prepare, of course, but take this as from my experience. Looking good in job interviews is important. So if you take the statement as looking good, looking polished and all that stuff, I don't believe that's as important as that. If you are talking about managing your image in a job interview, yes, I believe that's super important. For example, I have another video where I say staying scrappy in a job interview might not be such a bad idea. For an SD, for example, if you feel like that helps you to communicate the ideas better, why not? But usually managing your image is super important, but that doesn't really mean that you have to look good in a job interview, right? So manage your image, but be very careful of what really makes sense in your case. And last, number 10 here, you can tell if your interviewer went well by judging the body language of your interviewer. So this is totally false from my experience. This is very, very rarely the case. This is simply because the interviewer is very skilled, and this is the last thing they want you to notice, how the interview actually goes, because the best interviewers that I know will be also the ones that feel the most comfortable. So you give them as much information as you couldn't believe how much information you'd give them. Also, there are some interviews who make you feel very uncomfortable, so that you think it goes bad, so that again get the truth out of you in a way. But by no means take your interviewer's body language, body expression as a rule for how your interview went. So these were the 10 statements that I wanted to clarify. Hopefully you found them useful, and thank you very much for watching.